Hey everyone, we're covering Judaism today, and I want to talk about this very important religion, particularly to our modern culture that is both, uh, well, is primarily Christian, but its origins are in Judaism. So, um, start out here with the great Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Right, this declaration that God is singular, and that is the most important thing. Like Christians or Catholics often will use the sign of the cross to begin and end every prayer, in the name of Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Um, the Jews will use this Shema, this prayer. Now, Judaism begins and ends with the Torah, right? How to read the Hebrew scriptures. Um, it's it's very important to understand the genre you're reading, right? You wouldn't, like, after a long day, pick up a phone book and say, "Hey, I'm gonna do some light reading." No, that's not what that's used for. Or if you pick up a mystery novel and get frustrated after the first chapter that you don't know who done it, right? You got to know the genre of literature you're reading, and that's what the Bible, particularly the Old Testament, even more so, is about. It is about different kinds of genres, all like put together. Like if I were to kind of take some pages out of a history book, if I were to take some pages out of Aesop's fables, if I were to take like some pages from the Lord of the Rings, and I put them all together in one book, excuse me, um, that would be like what the Old Testament is like. So you got to know the genre, or else you'll totally miss what's going on, and you'll take things as historical that are not historical. And I hope that I'm not going to ruin anybody's childhood faith. But we'll do what we have to do here. All right. So um, now, and I guess I want to just use the example I have there of the three little pigs, right? We all were maybe raised on that story and know that story of three little pigs, right? Um, but at one point, maybe when you were two, when you heard it, you really thought that maybe somewhere, maybe in Portugal somewhere, pigs built houses. But you found out later on your kindergarten field trip to the farm that pigs, you look down at the pigs in the pen, and they're like, and you're like, there's no way these pigs build houses, right? And so you didn't go, well, um, somebody lied to me, right? And you didn't say, well, the moral of the story, which is like, if you do things right the first time, you'll be successful, like the pig who built with bricks. Um, you don't just say, well, forget that. I'm never doing anything, right the first time because they lied to me about the pig story. You don't do that, right? You understand that there's the story that conveys the meaning. You don't throw out the meaning, and the meaning is the most important part of the story of the three little pigs. So, in some senses, the story of the three little pigs is true, right? In that if you build things right the first time, it'll be successful. The details of pigs building houses and wolves blowing them down is not true. It's like kind of a lower T truth. Um, but that is like the metaphor. Joseph Campbell talked about that. Um, it's the story that we structure, and we can't stay so married to the story that we lose the moral, or that we think the story is more important than the moral. That's why these stories were written. Um, so now, when you talk about, say, the creation stories, we would compare, say, um, you look at the stories where they are um, uh, the first day of creation, light and darkness. Second is um, the sea and the sky. The third are the land and the plants, and then the um, fourth is the sun, moon, and stars, and then the fifth is the fish and the birds, and sixth are the animals and humanity. Now, historically, that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? That you would have, say, how would you have um, how would you have the land and the plants um, before you'd have the sun, moon, and stars, right? You need the sun for the plants. The plants wouldn't exist without the sun. So scientifically, that doesn't make sense. So if you go 1 through 6, it doesn't make any sense at all. But if you go 1, 2, 3, where you have light, you take 1, 2, 3, match it up to 4, 5, 6, and you match them across. Suddenly, it dawns on you that there is some connection. That light and dark match with the sun, moon, and stars. That the sea and the sky match up with birds and fish, and that the land and the plants match up with the animals. That in some senses, God creates a home even before he makes us. These things, the creation on this side. And that's a powerful example of the moral of a story that was tried to convey. Now, you have to understand that these stories, so many of these stories, were a whole bunch of nomadic people sitting around a campfire, and there was no TV, and so they would tell stories, right? And people would ask questions. So I can imagine a campfire where maybe a young kid asks, like, "Hey, how was the world made?" And so everybody looks around and they see the old grandpa in the corner who's sitting there, and he looks up and is like, "Oh crap, like they're expecting me to answer this question." And so he comes up with a story. Now again, four 6,000 years ago, what kind of scientific knowledge did he have? He looked up and he saw the blue sky up there, and he believed that those that the sky, which is blue, obviously was water, right? Because and that's the way it's described in the Bible, where you have the waters above and the waters below, and God puts a force field called the sky to separate the waters above and the waters below. And that every once in a while, some of that water comes down, right? Drop mic, of course. No, of course not that the science is wrong on that. But how could we expect somebody 6,000 years ago to know any of that, right? We can't. So, and also we can't expect ourselves to be handcuffed to the science of 6,000 years ago. We've learned, we've grown, we know what that is. We know that's not water in the sky. And so we can take that story, which was not about the details of how creation was made scientifically. It was about the morals of those stories. And those are the most important things. And those are the things we have to kind of focus on and stress. And so when we look at these, when we look to the Old Testament, we have to be okay with saying, okay, this story didn't necessarily historically happen, but that doesn't mean it's not true. True from the sense of the moral of the story. And if we can do that, then there's no fear to saying this story that I always believed to be true wasn't true. And that goes into stories like Adam and Eve, and that goes into stories like Noah, right? These separation stories: Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Noah, the Tower of Babel. These are all stories um, that are meant to show human beings breaking away from God, and that's an important piece here. Whether or not it be Adam and Eve eating the fruit, never says apple, um, of the tree from the knowledge of good and evil. It's not like they did anything wrong necessarily, but it's the fact that they took on the ability to know right from wrong, and that's humanity. So in some senses, before that they ate the fruit, were they truly human if they didn't have the knowledge of right and wrong? Right? Isn't that how all animals are, just reliant on instinct? Well, here we are in this, and it's only humanity, it's only Adam and Eve that eat this fruit. And so we are the ones who are banished from the Garden of Eden. We are the ones who are separated from the rest of the animals. That's the moral of the story. It's not about something bad that Adam and Eve did. This is about us separating ourselves from that, and choosing, having the ability to choose the good and the bad, which means we choose the bad sometimes, right? Um, and so we'll continue on in our next video.